Hello everyone. So the topic of today's video is about brainwaves. So we all know that when we operate, when we perform normal human functions, we emit um, different kind of brainwaves from different parts of our human brain or the head or from the skull. And depending on the locations of our brain, and also depending of the quality of our lifestyle, and depending on the way of our thinking, our energy system and our aura and our emotional stability and also the mental stability, we emit many different kind of brain waves, brain frequencies of different frequencies. And many people have conducted studies, be it scientific, religious or spiritual. All of these studies were performed to evaluate or gauge what is happening within us with respect to the brainwave signals. So some people, for an example, let's say go into meditation, and then they can reach certain calm abiding nature in their mind, and correspondingly a certain type of frequencies will emit from their brain areas. And in addition to that, we often see nowadays many scientists invite, let's say for an example, spiritual people, meditators, enlightened masters to join their research, so that in their laboratory sessions they perform this their brainwave signal monitoring, so that they can determine what kind of state, what kind of a tranquil state these meditators and people are in. So likewise, meditation, spirituality and science, also the religious studies, they are closely interrelated, and that's what we are going to evaluate and going to study in this video. Before going to the technical details, I would like to identify myself as a spiritual artist who is trying to describe and also interrelate the spiritual experience, the meditative experience, to science. So some people who know me from the, let's say, the Western background, some people who are coming from the Western background, well, they identify me as an atheist or agnostic, because I'm trying to give a scientific explanation to all the religious and spiritual experiences. And people from the Eastern side, well, they usually think that I'm trying to explain more about certain Abrahamic religious concepts, and trying to relate the God, the concept of God, into my meditative experience, and which is far from the Buddhist and the Eastern spiritual traditions and the concepts. But that's how the way it is. So different people have different perspectives about me, but I don't care. I simply share my experience and then try to find correspondence to that in other religious traditions at the same time. Well, now let's dive deep into the type of brainwaves we have. Well, now the analysis of these brainwaves and categorizing these brainwaves into different frequency bands. So this came into existence later, and these people didn't know about, let's say, the certain meditative states we can attain through meditation, the states that we often speak about, speak in relation to the consciousness, the God realization, and samadhis in both Abrahamic and Eastern religious traditions. So in this video is actually serving a main purpose of finding direct relation between these frequency bands and the meditative states we encounter typically in any religious tradition. So you could be coming from an Abrahamic faith and you do meditation in relation to that, and you could be coming from Eastern background. You're doing meditation according to the instructions you receive from Buddhist masters, or maybe some of the Hindu master. It doesn't matter, because as long as you are a human being, you will go through certain mental and meditative states, so that correspondingly you will produce some electrical signals from the certain brain areas. So that's what we are going to study in this video. So usually the gamma waves that are shown in the purple color, well, they usually operate and resonate between 32 to 100 hertz frequency range. So the gamma is the highest frequency, the highest and mostly the usable frequency band that we often find among all the brain waves. Then we come to beta signal. So the beta signal is usually between 12 hertz to 32 hertz. So the first category among all these brain waves is called gamma wave. So that's represented in purple color, and people usually relate it to the heightened perception, learning, problem solving tasks, and also to cognitive processing. And usually, in my opinion, the gamma waves can be related to creativity. And then the gamma waves are usually said to be ranging between 32 hertz to 100 hertz. So the wave category is called beta, and that's represented and shown in green color. So usually it is ascribed to awakeness, alert, being in alert, and also being conscious of your thought process, thinking, and sometimes even to excitement. And its range is usually between 12 to 32 hertz. Then we go down a bit, and then we come to a lower level of frequency representation, which is alpha, and that is said to be between 8 to 13 hertz. So as you can see now, the amplitude, the fluctuations that you see in this waveform, it has less number of fluctuations, and people believe that alpha waves are directly related to the physically and mental relaxation. So when people have less fluctuations in alpha waves, in their alpha wave, so they are claimed to be physically and mentally so relaxed. And then we come to the next different frequency band, which is theta, and that is usually between 4 to 8 hertz. So that is also said to be related to creativity, insight, deep states, dreams, deep meditation, reduced consciousness, etc., etc. And then we come to the lowest frequency, which is delta, and it is corresponding to deep dreamless sleep, loss of bodily sensations, awareness, and repair. So when you have less fluctuations in these frequency bands, then we usually relate it to the mental calmness. So the mental calmness can be directly perceived or identified by looking at the fluctuations of these waveforms. And sometimes, in my experience, certain brain waves, so for an example, gamma and beta, can only come to function with activation of certain chakras or the energy centers in your body. And certain type of brain waves, let's say for an example, delta and theta, they may not have direct relation to the awakening of chakras or the heightening of your energies, but instead to the calmness of your mind. So likewise, there's a distinction that we can make between these different brain waves, and it all depends on the quality of your thinking and the quality of your energy system, so that you can find direct relation between these two. But the next question is, how do we measure or demonstrate these the high frequency brain waves? How can we measure them? Well, there are many different instruments you can buy. There could be very high-end instruments that are at the same time expensive. Well, the experiments that I'm going to show you through this video, they were actually monitored and measured through this famous headband called Muse. So this Muse headband utilizes a specific kind of electrical signals or the brainwave signals called EEG. And these EEG signals, well, now the brains, now when you come to the biological aspects of the biological nature of the operation of your brain, there are different brain areas. For an example, we have this the neocortex. That's one specific area of your brain, and similar to that there are many other different areas, and they emit many different kind of signals. And these signals we are able to measure, we are able to quantify and represent these signals electrically using a special kind of sensors called EEG sensors. So these EEG sensors can detect or and pick up these electrical signals easily, and this picking up actually happening according to the vibration patterns, and then these signals can um, easily distinguish or easily represent the way of how the certain areas in your brain operate and how certain areas in your brain function. And if I'm not mistaken, this specific instrument called Muse headband, that is being also used in many reputed research institutes such as IBM and Intel. So that I think most of the recordings I took from this instrument are reliable, and therefore they give sort of like a testimonial to how our mind works and how our certain brain areas function with respect to the meditative attainments we have. Now let's talk about my experience and my interpretations of these brain waves. So the gamma, without the doubt, has the highest frequency range, and these highest frequency range usually can be monitored very close to the forehead. If you place these EEG sensors closed and on your forehead, you can easily detect the gamma waves. And the gamma waves usually, in my experience, can represent the heightening frequency of your consciousness or of your energy system. So for an example, especially for a person who have highly functioning sixth and seventh chakras, it can be easily detected with high fluctuations of gamma. And when, for an example, let's say when the kundalini, the so-called serpent energy in our body, it's reaching, let's say, from the bottom to the top of your head, it usually emits these gamma waves with a lot of fluctuations. And if you're, let's say, a keen meditator, and if you let's say if you have been into this meditation activity for a long time, for such people the gamma waveform is always available. And in my experience, um, the gamma wave doesn't necessarily say that you have less number or fewer number of thoughts. So the gamma wave can be directly related to the highest frequency of your body. Then now let's get back to let's go down to the beta waves. So that's the next frequency band. And in my experience, the beta wave is well, let's say exactly proportional to the number of mental activities and mental chatter. So we know that when we go into certain meditative states, like let's say dhyana or jhanic states, be it from Buddhist tradition or maybe Hindu tradition, we have this calm abiding nature. We develop the calm abiding nature. And when you go from the lowest level of the jhanic or meditative state to the highest level, this calm abiding nature will increase and the mental chatter will decrease. And in such situation, you can easily gauge the quality of your mind, the consciousness, through the beta waves. So the beta wave is directly corresponding to the mental chatter, mental activities. And in addition to that, from beta waves we can easily detect whether someone is in depression, in fear, anxiety, and also if the person is suspicious about, let's say, certain activities that are happening around him. So in that sense, the monitoring of this beta wave is really useful to see the state of our mind. And let's say if you have studied about certain Buddhist meditative practices and states, usually in highest form and formless absorptions, our mind tends to disappear totally. First the mind disappears, the mental chatter disappears, and then the body disappears. And all of these experiences, certainly the beta frequency will come down, and then you would notice very fewer number of mental activities or the fluctuations in the waveform. And then we come to the third waveform, alpha. Usually it is related to the relaxation of your mind, but this relaxation doesn't necessarily come from meditation. You can go into a relaxed state also sitting on a chair or even sleeping on your bed. And this can be easily related, noticed through alpha waves. And when your mind, usually the meditators know that our mind sometimes can go into certain passive states called bhavanga states. And in addition to that, when the mind is not grasping or inclined or hovering into any kind of mental object, then we have this specific kind of state called neutral state, and we call it unemitted state. And these passive and unemitted states can also be determined from these alpha waves. Then how about deep relaxation? Now we all know that during the sleep we go into this state called deep sleep, and most people don't have the luxury to stay in that state for a long time. But at least a person should have a deep sleep state at least I think for about 30 minutes, so that it will give a refreshing state to our body, mind, and that is, kind of like relaxation given by the mother nature or the universe to us. So this type of deep relaxation can be usually detected from theta wave. And the delta wave is also corresponding similarly to deep relaxation. But the most important thing that I need to make a distinction here is that certain Buddhist meditators are claimed to go into very high mental calmness state called Nirodha Samapatti, or the cessation of consciousness. And this cessation of consciousness is said to be 1,000 times better, 1,000 times blissful than a deep sleep state. See, now that is the benefit of meditation. And in my opinion, this delta wave can be easily directly related to this the very relaxed meditative state called the cessation of consciousness. So in both deep sleep and cessation of consciousness states, we can easily detect our mental calmness and zero mental activity through the delta waveforms. So as you can see, it has the lowest frequency. In Buddhist tradition, and also in addition to that in Hindu and certain yogic traditions, we always try to give a scientific explanation, scientific word to these meditative states. But if you want to relate it to a more of a religious term, of course, this can be this the last state, the cessation of consciousness, can be it can be make synonymous with the God consciousness. However, still there are many more levels that can be identified and explored in the deep corners of our human consciousness. But the cessation of consciousness is the state I would like to, the very basic state that I would like to equate to the fundamental state of the God consciousness. Because this is where our individuality, our ego self disappears into nothingness, so that we can be attuned, or we can get we can be attuned, and we can get ourselves one with the entire existence. Right. So we have had enough explanation to what the brainwaves are and what this Muse instrument does. So now let's take a look at a particular example. So in the first example I give here, um, it demonstrates uh, the brainwaves, the resulting brainwaves for operating and functioning of the higher chakras in our body. So in this case, the higher chakras means um, the chakras from the 6 to 7 chakras. So in our chakra system, human energy system, we have many major energy centers as well as minor centers. So between the 6th and 7th chakras, there are many um, energy points that we usually don't discuss and don't reveal, but still this waveform represents all the chakras, awakening of all the chakras, functioning of them between the 6th and 7th, including these two. So as you can see, so you can see the different waves. So we are monitoring 5 different waves in this graph. As you can see, there's a noticeable peak in the later part of the orange color wave, that is the gamma wave. So as I mentioned earlier, the gamma wave represents the higher heightening of the energy in our body. So the highest this increase in the peak of the gamma wave represents the activation and gradual attuning into the energy levels of the 6th to 7th. And at the same time, we see um,
a similar peak in the green color wave. So that is the beta wave. So the beta wave represents the quality of the thought process. Um, so the beta is corresponding to the mental activities. So increase in the beta wave represents a certain quality in our thought process, but it doesn't mean that we have less mental activities. So we need to make sure that the samadhis we usually attain by the activating of the certain chakras in our body from 6th to 7th, and absorption, getting ourselves absorbed in these samadhi states, doesn't necessarily mean that we have fewer number of mental activities. However, it will be guaranteed that we can go into zero mental activities if you practice meditation according to the Buddhist traditions. So in Buddhist tradition, we speak about these form and formless absorptions. So attainment of the jhanas or subtle mental concentrations or samadhis in Buddhist way, that usually results um, very fewer mental activities and even can lead into um, zero mental activity. So these two waveform graphs are the average waveforms monitored across a time window, a fixed time window of 20 minutes. And next to the average wave, we have the normalized wave. So that also gives an idea how these brain waves work. But the key takeaway from this depiction is to understand that certain brain waves work and operate according to activation of our chakras. So there's a relation between certain brain waves and activation of chakras, and there's also a relation between the other brain waves to the mental activity, the quality of thought process, the nature of the fluctuations in our thought process. So this is the distinction that we have to make from this first experiment. This type of response can be noticed and witnessed also when you are in close proximity to a guru. So let's say now you are going to meet a spiritual teacher, and the spiritual teacher is transmitting energy to your chakras so that you can get your higher chakras energized with the help of him. You would notice the same response. But then the next question is how the brain waves actually operate in this type of scenario in real world, in real time application. So this is something that we have to um, carefully look and carefully examine. And you can see here the real-time window is running with respect to the recorded brain waves. As you can see, there's a considerable increase in the orange color wave, that is the gamma wave. And the gamma wave with the beta wave is always, I mean, time to time, these two waveforms are rising in this graph. So that means that we are time to time getting into the higher mental absorptions resulted by the awakening of higher chakras, and sometimes our mind goes into that meditative state and comes out of it. And that's why we see rise and falls in these gamma waves. And the beta waves, as I mentioned, well, it's closely running to the gamma wave. It has less number of fluctuations, And that means, um, well, of course, there's a thought process. It is not as gross as in the situation where we don't meditate, but still there are some fluctuations. I hope this distinction is clear to you from this graph.
Our next real case scenario is monitoring these brainwaves from a person whose higher chakras are not activated, open, but at the same time who is in agitation. And then we have these average and normalized brainwave graphs. And as you can see noticeably, both gamma and beta waves, they are now um, falling under the rest of the brain waves. The lowest level brain wave is gamma, which means that there is no energy field, no energy emission or emitting of higher energy from this person. And the most important thing, the distinction that we can make is there's considerable variations we can notice in delta wave. So you can see that there are many consecutive spikes or peaks in the delta wave, the red color wave, and that essentially represents the agitated nature of our mind. And this is the average or the normalized waveforms. Because of this average nature, you don't see many fluctuations in the other brain waves. However, we can take a deep look at how all these brain waves work in real time. So now we are looking at that the real time graph. So as is evident from um, this scenario, the gamma wave is, as usual, is the lowest waveform, and above that we see the running of the beta wave. And both gamma and beta waves, well, they have less number of fluctuations, but as we discussed earlier, delta, theta, alpha waves are the waveforms that are related to the relaxation of our mind and mental chatter or the fluctuations in our mind. So you can see clearly there's a direct relation between that and the scenario we're discussing about. Even in this the time window, you can see compared to the gamma and beta waves, the other three waveforms have huge number of fluctuations, many consecutive peaks, and therefore we can clearly determine whether the person is in a relaxed state or in agitation or in tension. Well, our next scenario, the use case is the same person that we noticed in previous scenario who has agitation in mind and not having any activated high chakras. Now he is going to a master who can transmit meditative energies, samadhis, to this person, so that when he is in the close proximity to this guru, his higher energy centers, for example, let's say 6th and 7th chakras, get energized with the help of a guru. So in this scenario, the person and this master, they are in the same energy field. So you can think and imagine um, about an interaction between a disciple and an ancient master like Jesus Christ and Gautam Buddha. Um, so that's how also in ancient times people come in to meet spiritual gurus, and they got their energy centers and chakras activated with the help of them. So we have two graphs as usual representing the average waveforms and the normalized ones. And remember, in the previous case, the gamma wave was the lowest waveform. But now with the help of this guru, with the help of transmitting of this energy. His gamma wave now has reached a peak. There are a few jaw drops, but still you can say a considerable outcome of having done meditation in Samadhi transmission guru with the Samadhi transmission guru. In that way, you can clearly see the effect of getting attuned to the energy field of such a guru, and you can understand from this specific scenario what is the benefit of being in the presence of such an enlightened guru. So if you want some numbers, if you want to feel some numbers, well, this type of a rise can even go up to 15 decibel. So it's a considerable increase. However, as you can see, the other waveforms still have some fluctuation.
So for this particular example, here is the real-time window, real-time running of the waveforms. So what is the clear distinction we can see from here in this real-time window? What's the the major difference we see in this real-time window compared to um, the natural activation of our sixth and seventh chakras? In the natural activation, usually the gamma, the waveform, is usually reaching the level of 85 to 90 decibel levels. So the natural activation of our chakras and the resulting emitting energies from our chakras, it always shows higher intensity compared to the situation where we try to activate or energize our chakras with the help of a guru. So the guru's help is shown here. Right, now we come to the fourth example, the fourth scenario. Now, this scenario represents a use case, a situation where the person has a meditative experience and he has done it for a long time, and then he is seasoned with the meditation, but then he is utilizing his faith to increase the receptivity. So what he does is, with the awakening of his own chakras and with his initial stability and also the samadhi state in his mind, he goes into a place, for an example, like a spiritual or religiously um, valued place in their country to do meditation. So for an example, in Sri Lanka, we have such similar places or ancient ruins where we believe that we can be really receptive to the universal energies. So this is a similar example. So this person goes to a temple where the receptivity is high, so that compared to his normal gamma and beta waves, with the help of receptivity and with the help of faith in his religion, in his master, or in his the spiritual, let's say the ancient teacher, he is trying to attain or reach a higher peak in his meditative attainment or peak in samadhis. That's why we see a higher gamma wave and also a beta wave in this graph, in both in average graph as well as in the normalized graph. All right, so this is the last scenario, the last example, and this is the most interesting point that I want to highlight from all the experiments. These brain waves in this case are related to the subtlest state that we can achieve from meditation. So if you come from Buddhist background or even in Hindu background, we talk about many different samadhi states or subtle mental concentrations. But specifically in Buddhist tradition, we say that with the eradication or cleansing of our mind, we have the ability to reach into a certain fruition states during meditation where the mind totally disappears. So this is one of the fruition states. Well, depending on the location of your path, you may have one specific fruition state, and if you
are able to be at that fusion state, and if you are able to attain a very subtle meditative states, then in that state your mind will totally disappear, and in return you will have a fewer number of fluctuations in your thought process. So this example reflects that. And well, in this case, if you look at the average and normalized waveforms, you don't see very high gamma waveform, because this is not about energizing your chakra system. This is about having less fluctuations, having mental calmness. And this you can easily see from these waveforms. And if you look at the theta, alpha and beta waveforms, then you have a very fewer number of mental activities, and therefore this is a reflection of attaining very subtle meditative states. And for an example, you can have a better understanding. Now, as you can see, if you look at clearly all of the graphs, they have a very less number of fluctuations, very fewer number of consecutive peaks, rise and falls, compared to all the waveforms we have seen before. So this is a clear depiction, a reflection of attaining mental calmness with the help of jhana, or extremely subtle samadhi states, or even clear light states during meditation. So if you can notice this type of waveform, then it's a clear distinction where you have attained mental calmness. Usually for only a fully enlightened person can remain in this type of mental calmness for consecutive days without any interruption. Alright, so now it's the time to give a summary. So in this video we have discussed about different brain waves and possible potential instrument that we can utilize to measure these waveforms, so that we can measure, quantify the quality of the brain functions with respect to the meditative attainments we have. And we have presented 5 case studies, and that is to analyze and demonstrate what meditation can do to our mind, what subtle meditative concentrations, samadhis, dhyanas, or the ancient teachings, results of ancient teachings can do to our mind, brain, and it is given as a scientific experiment. So let's try to conclude what we have attained, what we have learned from this experiment. So the activation of chakras, opening of these higher chakras, or heightening the energy levels in your body, doesn't essentially mean that you have attained mental calmness. So there's a clear distinction between these two. Even if you go to a master or teacher who can transmit these energies, well, you can only energize certain chakras in your body, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have attained the mental calmness. The true mental calmness can only be attained by practicing meditation for a prolonged period of time, with the help of attaining or going into jhanas, and also going into the fruition mind states by eradicating certain mental fetters. Activation of chakras can also bring peaceful nature into you, but the true peace only comes with the eradication of fetters. And more importantly, having faith, trust in your spiritual guru or your religious tradition or in God can increase the receptivity of your meditation, so that you can quickly go into certain meditative states. And if you practice this in a very specific religious place, the receptivity certainly can increase. So we had a separate case study. I think the case study 4 reflects this type of example.
And these scientific experiments also give an evidence to make the difference between the Shakti path or the energizing path and the Buddhist Arya path. So in the Shakti path, as I mentioned, we are essentially opening our chakras and going into high energy states, but it doesn't necessarily mean having zero mental activities or the mental calmness. So there's a clear distinction, and it can be scientifically validated, quantified using these brainwave functions. And that's the end of the video. I ask you to comment in our video, so, and also subscribe to our channel so that I can produce more videos related to the mind and matter. Thanks.